immediately swept the room, lingering on the case files and weapon. Thompson removed his hat, revealing a receding hairline dark with perspiration despite the cool October weather. I'll get straight to the point. I have a confidential informant who claims to have information about Agent Rivera. Alina, I mean your sister Marcus. Pulse quickened. What kind of information? That's the complication. Thompson shifted his weight, his hand unconsciously moving toward his service weapon before dropping to his side. This individual has had some negative experiences with federal agencies. They specifically requested to speak only with Elena's family member, not in any official capacity. They're skittish, ready to run at the first sign of a formal investigation. Where is this informant? Now that's what I'm here about. They're willing to meet, but only at a location of their choosing. Somewhere private, away from any potential surveillance. Thompson's phone buzzed and he glanced at it quickly before continuing. I know it's irregular, but given the potential value of the information. Marcus studied the sheriff carefully. What exactly did this informant tell you? Why come forward now, after 8 years? The discovery at the cave has people talking. Thompson said, his words coming faster now. Old secrets have a way of surfacing when bodies start appearing. Look, I understand your skepticism, but I was part of the original search effort. I want answers as much as you do. I appreciate that. Sheriff, tell me what evidence was recovered today. I was only there briefly. Thompson leaned forward, his interest sharpening. That's what I was hoping you could tell me. My department's been kept out of the loop. Federal jurisdiction, and all 3 bodies identified. Any personal effects recovered? 2 of the victims remain unidentified. Sarah Collins was confirmed through dental records and the vehicle. Thompson pressed. I heard something about it being surprisingly well preserved. The forensics team must have mentioned their timeline estimates. Warning bells rang in Marcus's mind. The sheriff's questions were too specific, too focused on evidence details rather than the victims. They're still processing the scene. Why do you ask? Just trying to understand the full picture. Thompson wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. And Alina she was her body among those recovered there. It was a flash of something in Thompson's eyes when Marcus shook his head. Relief. It appeared and vanished so quickly Marcus almost doubted he'd seen it. No, Alina wasn't in the cave. Marcus kept his voice neutral, watching the sheriff's reaction. That's Thompson paused, visibly collecting himself. Well, that leaves hope. She might have survived the initial incident. All the more reason to meet with my informant. Tell me, Sheriff, will the forensics team be expanding their search, bringing in additional resources like ground-penetrating radar? Thompson's response came too quickly. Too detailed. Standard procedure would involve systematic GRID expansion, cadaver dogs, GPR units for the surrounding area. The D will probably request thermal imaging drones. Check nearby water sources, examine game trails for evidence of remains being moved by animals. They'll want to search at least a 5 meters radius from the primary scene. Marcus nodded slowly. Few county sheriffs could outline DEA evidence procedures with such precision. You seem very familiar with federal investigation protocols. I've worked with your agency before, Thompson said, but his eyes darted away. Cross-border jurisdiction issues. Mostly we need to coordinate resources, make sure we're not duplicating efforts, of course. Marcus stood a clear signal. The conversation was ending. I'll need to clear any meeting with my supervisor. First time is a factor here. Thompson insisted, rising as well. My informant won't wait long. They're scared. Agent Rivera. Whatever they know, it's had them looking over their shoulder for 8 years. Give me 2 hours. I'll contact you through official channels. Thompson's jaw tightened, but he nodded. 2 hours after that. I can't guarantee they'll still be willing to talk. He moved toward the door, then paused. Agent Rivera, I know what it's like To lose someone I had a sister too died in a car accident. When she was 23, the not knowing that would be even worse, the words rang hollow, a performance that didn't quite reach. Thompson's eyes. Marcus maintained his expression of gratitude until the door closed, then immediately moved to the window. He watched Thompson sit in his patrol car for several minutes, making what appeared to be an heated phone call before finally driving away. Every instinct Marcus had developed in 15 years with the D screamed danger. Thompson's specific questions, his detailed knowledge, the convenient appearance of an informant. Just hours after the bodies were discovered, it all formed a pattern too suspicious to ignore. But if there was even a chance the sheriff had real information about Elena, Marcus couldn't dismiss it entirely. He picked up his phone to call Director Thornton, then hesitated. Official channels meant official responses, and Thompson would be notified immediately of any federal inquiry if the sheriff was involved. Somehow alerting him would only give him time to cover his tracks. Marcus retrieved his service weapon, checking the magazine before holstering it. Whatever Thompson's real agenda, one thing was clear: the sheriff knew more about Elena's disappearance than any uninvolved local lawman should, and his barely concealed relief at learning Elena's body wasn't in the cave suggested that knowledge was worth protecting. The D field office occupied the 15th floor of a federal building in downtown Seattle, its windows offering a panoramic view of Elliott Bay that Marcus barely noticed as he badged through security at 2:00 p.m. His mind churned with the implications of Thompson's visit, replaying every micro-expression, every too specific question, every moment of barely concealed relief. When he learned Elena's body hadn't been found, the archive room hummed with the white noise of climate control systems designed to preserve decades of case files. Marcus pulled up the digital records first, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he accessed the original missing persons report, the one he'd filed himself 8 years ago. When Elena failed to check in after 48 hours, reading his own words brought back the raw panic of those first days, the gradual shift from concern to desperation as hours became days, became weeks. But it was Sheriff Thompson's contributions to the investigation that drew his attention now. The sheriff had filed his first report at 7:23 a.m. the morning after Elena and Sarah disappeared, remarkably detailed for someone who claimed to have been off duty the previous night. Marcus read through Thompson's assessment with fresh eyes, his suspicions crystallizing with each paragraph. Based on my extensive knowledge of local terrain, Thompson had written, I recommend focusing search efforts on the following sectors. What followed was a carefully constructed search grid that Marcus now realized created a corridor of uncharted territory. Along the Canadian border, Thompson had justified each exclusion with reasonable-sounding explanations. This area was too steep for vehicle access, that section flooded. Seasonally, another zone was fenced private property with security that would have reported any intrusion. Marcus pulled up satellite imagery from 8 years ago, comparing it to Thompson's recommendations. The impassable terrain showed clear evidence of trails. The flooded sections were bone dry in the images from that October, and the secured private property appeared to be abandoned structures with no visible fencing or security measures. He dug deeper into the supplemental files, finding a report that made his blood run cold. James Carver, a game warden with 30 years experience in these woods, had filed a contradictory assessment just 2 days after Thompson's. Carver noted well-established paths through sectors 7 and 9, the exact areas Thompson had declared impassable. The warden had even mentioned recent vehicle tracks inconsistent with logging operations near the cave system. Yet somehow, Carver's report had been buried in supplemental files, never integrated into the main Investigation Marcus' fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up missing persons databases for Cascade County and surrounding jurisdictions. He set parameters for the past decade, focusing on Thompson's patrol areas. The results made him lean back in his chair, a chill running down his spine. 17 missing persons cases along Thompson's regular patrol routes. The state average for similar rural areas was 4 to 5 over the same period. The victims showed a disturbing pattern, mostly young women, many of them immigrants or traveling alone, people whose disappearances might not trigger immediate large-scale searches. Maria Gonzalez, 28, undocumented immigrant, last seen hitchhiking near the border. Ashley Chen, 19, college student, whose car broke down on Highway 20. Natasha Volkov, 24, Russian tourist who vanished during a solo hiking trip. Case after case, all bearing Thompson's assessment signature. Likely voluntary disappearance, probable border crossing to avoid immigration enforcement. No evidence of foul play. The sheriff had effectively shut down deeper investigations. With his authoritative reports and jurisdictional complexities, meant federal agencies rarely second-guessed local law enforcement assessments. Marcus accessed the shared law enforcement database using his federal credentials to pull Thompson's duty logs from October 8, years ago. The official record showed routine patrols, nothing out of the ordinary, but when Marcus cross-referenced with fuel receipts from the county motor pool, a glaring discrepancy emerged. Thompson's logged patrols should have consumed approximately 80 meters worth of fuel, the receipt showed. He'd burned through enough gas for 240 miles, triple the distance. Where had Thompson driven that night? The answer came from an unexpected source buried in the supplemental files of the original investigation. Marcus found raw cell tower data that had been collected but apparently never analyzed. In the chaos of a multi-agency search operation, it seemed no one had thought to check where Thompson's phone had been pinging. Marcus ran the data through mapping software, watching as Thompson's movements painted a damning picture. At 11:47 p.m., approximately 2 hours after Elena's last check-in, Thompson's phone pinged a tower near the cave system, the same cave where the truck had just been found. He remained in that area for over an hour, his phone connecting to towers in a pattern consistent with someone moving around the location, not just driving through. Then at 2:15 a.m., the signal showed him heading north toward the Canadian border before eventually returning to town. The sheriff had been at the crime scene the night Alina and Sarah disappeared. He'd spent considerable time there, hours before any missing persons report was filed, before anyone except their killer should have known something was wrong. Marcus felt the weight of the evidence settling on his shoulders. A corrupt sheriff strategically positioned to facilitate smuggling operations, covering up disappearances, quite possibly involved in the murder of 2 federal agents, but knowing and proving were different things, especially when accusing a fellow law enforcement officer. He understood with crystal clarity why he couldn't report this through official channels, yet the law enforcement community was tightly interconnected. Any inquiry into Thompson would trigger immediate alerts through the system. The sheriff would know within minutes that he was under investigation. Evidence would disappear, witnesses would vanish or recant, and any chance of finding out what really happened to Alina would evaporate. Marcus began methodically copying files to an encrypted external drive, financial records showing Thompson living well beyond a county sheriff's salary, property records indicating he owned 3 rental houses and a boat, all purchased with cash over the past 6 years, travel records showing frequent trips to Vancouver and Seattle, always returning through remote border crossings rather than official ports of entry. The picture that emerged was of a man who'd been corrupted years ago, who'd turned his position into a profitable enterprise built on human misery, but had he graduated from facilitating smuggling to murder had Alina and Sarah discovered his operation, forcing him to eliminate them? Marcus saved the final files as his phone buzzed. Thompson texting from his personal number. Informant agreed to meet 5 o'clock p.m. Old Brackenridge Mill off Forest Road 47. Come alone, or they won't show the location, was perfect for an ambush. Isolated with only one access road, no cell coverage, if Thompson wanted to eliminate a federal agent who was getting too close to the truth, he couldn't have chosen better, but it was also exactly the kind of place where Alina might have been held, might have died, might still be waiting to be found. Marcus closed the files and pocketed the encrypted drive he had for pieces of damning evidence: Thompson's presence at the crime scene, his systematic misdirection of search efforts, the pattern of disappearances in his jurisdiction, and his inexplicable wealth. It wasn't enough for a conviction, maybe not even for an arrest, but it was enough to know he was dealing with a killer. The question now was whether he could use that knowledge to find Alina without becoming Thompson's next victim. The paperwork at the D motor pool took less than 5 minutes, but to Marcus every second felt like an eternity. He selected a grey Honda Accord with tinted windows and civilian plates, the kind of vehicle that would blend into traffic without drawing a second glance. His hands remained steady as he signed the checkout form, but his mind raced with the implications of what he discovered in the archives at 3:25 p.m. Marcus positioned himself across from the Cascade County Sheriff's office, engine running, air conditioning on low to prevent the windows from fogging. He'd changed into civilian clothes, jeans, a mariner's jacket, and a baseball cap that shadowed his face. The encrypted drive with Thompson's files sat in his inner pocket. A digital insurance policy he hoped he wouldn't need. Thompson emerged from the building at 3:32 p.m., his body language different from the nervous energy he'd displayed at the motel now. He moved with purpose, scanning the parking lot with the practice sweep of someone who expected surveillance. Marcus let 2 cars pull out before following, maintaining a 3-vehicle buffer. As they navigated through town, the sheriff's patrol car turned north onto Highway 20, then quickly diverged onto a series of increasingly remote logging roads. Marcus' suspicions solidified as Thompson executed a textbook surveillance detection route: unnecessary turns, speed variations, pulling to the shoulder to force following vehicles to pass. Twice, Marcus had to take parallel roads, using his knowledge of the terrain to predict Thompson's route and reacquire visual contact. The dance continued for 20 minutes, Thompson's patrol car kicking up dust clouds on the gravel roads that forced Marcus to hang back even further. The sheriff was heading toward the Canadian border, into the same wilderness where Alina and Sarah had vanished. Dense stands of Douglas fir and western hemlock pressed close to the road, their shadows creating a premature twilight beneath the canopy. Thompson finally turned onto a rooted access road marked only by a rusted chain that had been recently cut. Marcus couldn't follow without being spotted, so he continued past, finding a concealed turnout a 4-mile ahead. He grabbed his binoculars and phone, then moved through the forest on foot, using game trails to circle back toward Thompson's destination. The trees opened onto a clearing dominated by the skeletal remains of the Brackenridge lumber mill, abandoned since the spotted owl controversies of the 1990s, but the site showed signs of recent activity. Fresh tire tracks crisscrossed the packed earth, new padlocks gleamed on the gate, and security cameras had been mounted on poles. Someone had repurposed this remote location for activities that required privacy. Marcus found an elevated position behind a massive fallen cedar, the natural blind offering clear sight lines. While keeping him concealed through his binoculars, he watched Thompson park near a cluster of vehicles, 2 pickup trucks and a van with British Columbia plates. The sheriff checked his weapon before approaching 3 men who emerged from the mill's main building. Recognition hit Marcus like a physical blow. He knew these faces from DEA intelligence briefings. Victor Koff, suspected of running drugs through the border forests, Chen Wei linked to human trafficking operations, and Robert Bobby Tanner, a local who had been questioned but never charged in multiple smuggling cases. The 3 men who always seemed to slip through law enforcement nets, who always knew exactly when and where to avoid patrols. Now, Marcus understood why Thompson greeted the men with familiar ease, accepting backslaps and handshakes like old friends. Clove produced a thick manila envelope from his jacket, which Thompson accepted without hesitation. The sheriff's back was to Marcus as he counted the contents, but his body language suggested satisfaction with the payment. Marcus managed to capture several photos with his phone zoom. The digital evidence, grainy but clear enough to identify all parties. The wind shifted, carrying fragments of conversation across the clearing. Marcus strained to hear, catching pieces that made his blood run cold. Increased federal presence since the cave discovery. Thompson was saying they'll expand the search grid within days. Then we move everything tonight. Clove replied, his accent thick but understandable. The northern warehouse first. Chen Wei gestured angrily. This is too fast. We have product in transit. Buyers expecting delivery. Would you rather explain to buyers or to federal agents? Thompson interrupted. I'll handle the cleanup at the northern site, same as I did 8 years ago. The casual reference to 8 years ago, when Elelanina disappeared, sent ice through Marcus's veins. He forced himself to remain still, to keep recording, despite the rage building in his chest. What about the bodies in the cave? Tanner asked nervously. If they identify the other 2, they won't. Thompson said firmly. Maria and her daughter aren't in any databases that matter. Just 2 more illegals who disappeared crossing the border, Maria and her daughter. Marcus filed the names away, thinking of the 2 unidentified bodies in the cave. Victims who now had names, if not Justice. Thompson pulled out his phone, dialing a number. Yeah, it's me. We have a problem. The Rivera brother is asking questions. Marcus's name on the sheriff's lips felt like a target being painted on his back. He was too interested in the evidence, asking about expansion of the search area. How much do you think the D guy really knows about what happened to his sister? The response was inaudible, but Thompson's next words carried. Clearly he might be a problem that needs addressing. He's staying at the Cascade. Ridge Room 12. Icon Clove grabbed Thompson's arm. No more federal agents. You killed 2, and look where we are now. I kept us safe for 8 years. Thompson snarled. If Rivera keeps digging, he'll find the northern site. Then we're all finished. Then we clear it tonight. Chen Wei said decisively. Everything, product, equipment, records, burn what we can't move, and the merchandise. Tanner asked Marcus, realized with growing horror that merchandise has meant people trafficking victims. Move them through the usual corridor. Thompson said, I'll make sure patrol units are elsewhere. We have maybe 6 hours before Rivera can mobilize any real search. The meeting began to break up, the men moving toward their vehicles with the efficiency of a